The nutritionist for a world tour team just told me the fueling mistake that almost every amateur makes, and it's not eating too little like everybody tells you. It's that you're eating the right food at completely the wrong time. Sophie Conroy fuels some of the best riders in the world at Tudor Pro Cycling, and today she's going to walk through exactly what she changed about how you eat on the bike, off the bike, and immediately after the bike. Starting with the number one mistake that most people are getting so badly wrong. Welcome to the podcast, Sophie Conroy. Sophie, welcome to the Roadman Podcast.
Thanks.
Some of us know, some of us may not know. Question to start to kind of frame the conversation. What does a performance nutritionist at a World Tour team, what's it? What's the job? What do you actually do day to day?
Yeah, my family asks me that all the time as well. It's like, what do you actually do?
At Christmas.
At Christmas, at any event. It's like, I don't know what you actually do. Yeah, I suppose top line is taking care of the athletes, trying to make them go faster on the bike. From a point of view of how nutrition can influence that, in a real simplified definition. What that looks like day to day is there is two nutritionists, two or three nutritionists on the team. We work individually with athletes. We oversee all race plans, so we could have like 2 or 3 race programs going on at once in different parts of the world, or mainly Europe. And it's the preparation for those races, it's the meal planning, the within those races. So if you look at it like, I suppose, I always see it as like you've in race and out of race. So the in race is like top line support, what they need to eat, looking at the type of races. And then the outside races is the support that to support training, adaptation, and goals to make sure they're healthy and ready to race. I think that's the easiest way.
And
What
is
I
it down to
think.
even the logistics of, you're going to Tour de France and this is what we have to eat off the bike. How are we sourcing this food off the bike?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, the logistics are huge. Like, compared to any other sports I've worked in, the logistics are so complex. In the sense, like, I don't think you get an idea of first the challenging of logistics on top of just getting food into them. So, for like, I explain it to people that if you think of a band touring like into different stadiums, we basically move like that as a team. We've buses, we have kitchen trucks, we have obviously the people, we've cars, everything, and we move um from hotel to hotel, different location to different locations. So um from like literally that top line logistics um point of view, it's really challenging. And then what we eat outside the races, they obviously eat on the bike, but off the bike, we at a grand tour or anything, we have uh breakfast, and the chef is there with his kitchen truck, serves the breakfast. We've all the menu planned that supports the type of day we have, whether it needs to be low fiber, uh, tends to be stay on low fat during races, um, or it's just support the needs for those riders on that day. Then we might have supporting the, depending on how far the race is, we might have a pre-race meal as well, packed up, ready to go. They eat on the bike. Then we have our post-race meal that's packed up, ready to go from the chef. As soon as they get off finish the race, they get their shake, their post-race, and then we move on to the next place, which would be the chef's already moved there, which is kitchen truck, which you can imagine like a kitchen truck on the side of a festival. That's what it looks like. And he's prepared all the food based on the menus and everything we've sent them. So we would have sent menus 4 weeks in advance of a grand tour.
That
Um,
that's
so
class. I want to dig into there's so much specifics there that you kind of casually glossed over, but like the audience is so curious on so many aspects of that, like the post race shake to how much to eat in the afternoons. But even before we dive into all that, overarching principle wise, is fueling a world tour rider, is this like fueling a serious amateur, only scaled differently, or are the principles totally different?
Um, so I think the biggest thing is principles of like trying to get food into people, the importance of feeding, no matter what your level, is going to be there. I think what it changes is pro rider is going to have been training and their adaptation to their ability to take up fuel is probably a bit different.
Yeah.
Like, and their adaptation to heat, their sweat adaptation, all of these things are going to be at a higher level than an amateur or a weekend warrior. So the principles in what we say is like um, we need carbohydrates, we need to ensure we're fueling, we need to ensure we eat before a session, during a session, and activate recovery or start recovery after a session if you're a half serious amateur. Those principles, those basics, foundations, I think are always going to stay the same. Where I think you see the difference is the ability on the physiology of a person to on what they can uptake, or like the amount of carbohydrates an hour on the bike they might be able to absorb, and then obviously the ability of having a team to support to hand you a shake versus you being an amateur rider having to do it yourself. Because
Go to the Spar to get your chocolate milk after.
yeah, which is like, I mean, like there's different ways to dress it up. Do you know what I mean? We might have all these really fancy things. It was like, yeah, but if you eat a banana and have milk, it's probably the same thing going into the shop after.
We were chatting off air at the start, and I came back to cycling for the Tokyo 2026 cycle, and I remember working with a nutritionist at the time, and I was telling you this story about how he had me basically on zero carbohydrates, and that was a common, like we know that now that that's a mistake, but it's like it's not what we don't know that hurts us, it's what we know for sure that just isn't so. I think is the famous quote. Like back then we thought that was the way to fuel. There was maybe reasons that narrative was coming down to kind of elite amateurs, but when you look at elite amateurs now, is there like a common fueling mistake you see them making?
Probably not. Yeah, probably go on one end of the spectrum in that they don't eat enough, or they think they can eat more. They read like an article on Tour de France, something on social media, and it's like, oh, Pogacar consumes, don't quote, like this isn't an actual quote, but like 150 grams of carbs an hour. It's like, oh, that's what I should be doing. And you're like, yeah, well, there's a reason to a certain degree they are able to do that. They are freaks of nature. Like people have different absorption capacities, and there's different, they've been doing that for years as well. But they might think then like, oh, I should be doing that, and then throws in 150 grams of carbs an hour, spends for on gels and or whatever product you want, and then particularly if they're trying to lose weight, they're wondering why they're not trying to lose weight because they're eating so much. So you have that end of the spectrum where they have too much and they might hurt their stomach. The ability to absorb that is, for anyone who doesn't know, is ridiculous. Or then you have people who like, well, I'll just go out, I'll eat a slice of toast beforehand, and I'll stop for a coffee, which, you know, is natural in cycling, coffee and cake, which is fine. So I think that's the big difference. You've two ends of the spectrum. Rarely do they get it absolutely right. And in fairness, I don't blame people, because even with the pro riders, we're trying to always find what their happy spot is as well, because some people may be able to absorb more or tolerate more, because it's hard on the gut. Your gut's going through so much when you're at a high intensity or even a moderate intensity.
I think this is one of the areas that doesn't scale, that absolute matters more than relative. You know, I know HEXIS is brilliant for this, because you can throw your data into HEXIS and say, I'm going out, I'm going to do 3 hours at 250 watts, and it'll tell you how many grams per hour to eat. But if somebody wants to make that calculation themselves, just because 250 watts is, or the numbers are probably higher for someone like Pogacar, to continue that example. Pogacar's zone 2 is probably 280, 300 watts. Yeah. If average Joe club cyclist is going out for a zone 2 ride at 150 watts, to make the maths easy, he's putting out 50% of the power Pogacar is, so he doesn't need to fuel the same amount that Pogacar does. But how do they make that calculation as to how many grams of carbohydrates they do need if they're going out for a ride at X intensity?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always start, even with the guys when they're racing, it's like, look at the overview of the day, and how much it might be, like if you have an app based system or calculation. I'd always start on the basis of how much energy do they need throughout the whole day, because you don't want to go onto the bike in an underfueled state, and you need to be able to have a budget for like carbohydrates and calories after your race as well. So
Yeah.
you like mathematically, if you have a 4 or 5 hour ride and it's at a higher intensity, you're going to use more energy. If it's at a lower intensity, you're going to lose a lower amount of energy. So I would start 24 hour or 12 hour really when you're awake. You need a certain amount of carbohydrates before, a certain amount after, and then the rest of the budget goes a lot of time at simplest within that race period and tend to go from a lower up to a higher. So it's an increased approach throughout to support because if you get on the bike, you're going to have carbs in your system anyway. So you're, for the first hour, you might have 60 grams. The pros are probably a bit more, and then that might increase to support the duration and intensity of the ride. But what I would always, that's the way, it's like energy budget. I'd start at energy budget and then the demands of the race. If it's really, really hard, and it's an all out, even in the amateur or pro, because it's all relative to the person. Like what's really, really hard, a 9 or 10 on an RP scale for a amateur is going to be different for a pro. Do you know what I mean? So you're not going to be as efficient, and your utilization is going to be different. So you might need more, relatively speaking, to that. So that's where I'd start, and then calculate how much then you have within the hour's budget.
Summer is usually when the big gravel adventures happen, and Vittoria have made it incredibly simple to choose a tyre that matches the terrain you actually ride. Historically, gravel tyre names across the industry are a complete mess. Even experienced riders like me, we often don't know which is faster, which is grippier, which suits mud or hard pack. That's why I like what Vittoria have done with their gravel range. They've simplified it. Instead of confusing names, their tyres use a simple terrain scale. Lower numbers mean faster rolling tyres for smoother terrain. Higher numbers mean more grip and more control when conditions get rough. My go-to tyre this summer is the Vittoria T50. It's built for mixed terrain, which honestly suits most of the gravel riding that I do, especially when you don't always know what conditions the route is going to throw at you. So whether you want speed for fast gravel races or confidence on loose technical descents, it's easy to find the right tyre when you're going riding with Vittoria. Go over now to vittoria.com and check out the full range of Vittoria tyres, which are going to keep you rubber side down this summer. Yeah, that makes sense. So if somebody is listening to this and they're planning their long weekend ride, we typically, when we're time crunched, we get our longer ride into weekend. It's a club spin. How am I thinking about looking at that Sunday 24-hour budget?
Yeah. Okay, so like, let's say you're not having pints or anything. Let's assume you're trying to be relatively healthy. So like, I would, if I know I'm going for a big like 5 hour ride the next day, I'd probably think of the night before and have a little more carb up. That morning, you'd have a solid breakfast, the right types of carbs, not just like croissants, and which would be high in fat, even though it's carbs, it's high in fat. So like quick release type carbs, toast and some protein, scrambled eggs, but a good amount of portion, let's say 2 grams per kg. That's me really simple out there. Don't quote on that. It depends on the person's ability. Then you pack your bag or your pockets for the bike. You could have gels, you could have sandwiches. Thinking of like, I need to have, let's say, modern gels of anything from like 45 grams is typically what the gels have. And you have your bottle with maybe carbohydrate solution or water. So let's say you start at 45 and then you increase that to go up to 90 in the following hours. You might stop for a coffee ride. You include your coffee and cake in your carbohydrates. By the time you get off the bike, the amount of carbohydrates and calories you've had, you might be 3 p.m., let's say 4 p.m. in the afternoon. You have your lunch, your energy budget there. And then you go home and you have your dinner from an energy point of view there. Like, obviously, I'm not, like, you could say 5,000 calories, but if someone's a different size, it's going to be different. But I would always like construct it around like your breakfast, your main meals, and then the rest of the energy budget in there. Obviously, it depends on if you're going amateur going to try to go to pro and you want specific adaptation for some reason or another, you might push carbohydrates to perform. Do you know what I mean? If you're just going on a social kind of ride and you just want to enjoy it, you might just get enough to tick by. So that's why I look at the energy budget, and then you're prioritizing your fueling before, your fueling during, and then almost your recovery. But it's normal food. Do you know what I mean? It's nothing too crazy either.
So if, say, 2 or 3 friends came to you of varying different levels of seriousness, all with that same question around how should I plan my nutrition, is that like the first guy or girl who's just getting started? And if someone wanted to get more serious, would you just point them to HEXIS to figure out exactly how many grams of carbohydrates to have for their breakfast, dinner, lunch? Or would you still look to do that as a calculation?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a good question. Like, if let's say we'll start with the amateur or the person who's a total beginner, to a certain degree, like it might be even like some of my young riders that come, because I look after the developing riders as well. So let's say they come in and it's like, oh, do you know what? They're not eating anything on the bike. The first aim could be like, if that's the stage there, if that's meeting them where they're at, it's like, if I just throw them onto an app like HEXIS or something, or anything, they could, like, they'll melt. They won't have a clue.
Yeah.
They can't even consume. They're looking to consume water on the bike. So it could be a case of like, you know, let's meet you where we're at. Can we eat food beforehand? Can we eat a little bit, whether it's gels? Can we introduce you to that? This is why you need it. What is your what are your training goals? The training goal there at that stage, if it's a total newbie, could be getting used to literally the behavior of eating on the bike and the taste and the ability to manage that in the gut. Because it's, for anyone who hasn't, it's really hard. It can be really hard to actually eat on the bike, whether it be jellies, whether it be gels, whether it be sandwiches. So if we're looking at that from the basics and actually being a good practitioner and actually wanting to achieve a behavior or a goal, to deciding what is that goal for them, because their basic is like they need to be able to walk before they can run, or pedal really easy before they can pedal fast, you know? So that might be there. If someone's more accomplished in that, understands their basic, what carbohydrates are, what they have a tolerance, they're kind of wanting to take it next level, absolutely. Something that can do the calculations for them, particularly, like, it's different. Our guys obviously have us to do calculations to educate them, to be able to map everything out for them. But obviously, if you're an amateur on your own, you need to have that support. So to send them onto that, it's like, go into this will calculate for you. You have an idea, and it will have a look at it, have common sense, because sometimes algorithms and AI, it can leave you with nothing but budget. So it's like, oh, I don't want to eat absolutely nothing for dinner, so I'm going to pull something off that. But if that is what you if you're at that ability to understand what carbohydrates are, what what everything tastes like, that you really want to push it, you really want to get adaptation from your session, you really want to train hard, then something like that, to give a support tool where someone doesn't have a nutritionist, particularly, because most people, let's be honest, don't have a nutritionist, is perfect. And then that will at least distribute the day, and you can visually see how the day looks like. Doesn't necessarily mean exactly what specific you will eat. You still need to decide what you'll eat. Do you know what I mean? But like I said, it's just meeting people where they're at, because there's varying conditions of like one's ability to eat the right foods or even know what to do.
The cycle I see is with club riders, and, you know, apologies for categorizing all club riders in together. It's definitely all club riders, but there's a bunch of club riders I see who, when I chat to them, or we survey them on our newsletter, like, what's your biggest goal? So many people come back with, want to lose weight. And so then when I dig into it a little bit deeper and you chat with guys on club spins, and it's like, well, what does that look like? So they're carrying a bit of extra weight. They realize in their head it's calories in versus calories out. So they realize they have to create a deficit. So they're motivated now because they've made that decision. Monday morning, the diet starts. I'm knocking the points on the head. I'm only eating good quality food, or, you know, these terms like clean eating and stuff like that, which are so vague and nebulous. I don't think any of us know what they mean. But then, because they're motivated, they'll create a big calorie deficit for maybe day 1, 2, 3, 4, inevitably creating a big calorie deficit. At some point like that, the motivation wanes. Probably the weekend, they're back having a couple of pints in the kebab on the weekend, and then they go into this punishment cycle again come Monday. And it's like, to use a financial analogy, it's like a boom and bust cycle. And they repeat that. How do you speak to an amateur like that? Someone comes into your clinic and they're in this boom and bust cycle. How do you pull them out of that and get to something more sustainable, weight loss focused?
Yeah, you know, it's so funny because it's the same if you're an amateur. It's the same if your parents or typical anyone on like a Monday morning diet. But I think the it's understanding where to pull the energy from. Like I always start like if you're tapping into the motivations, like what's the motivation to lose weight? Is it just a person, or is it like a performance point of view? If you're a decent club cyclist, let's say, um, first of all, if we're on a trying to create a calorie deficit, yeah, it is calories in, calories out, but where you put those calories is important as well to your cycling. We never sacrifice on the fueling around on the bike or around the bike. You always protect the session. That's seriously. So like if you're training 4 times a week, as or 3 or 4 times a week, let's say in the summertime when the nights are nice, we all know we see them all out. You don't want to sacrifice and go into a calorie deficit when you're on that bike. So that's the first thing, like tap into like, okay, we need to protect this. We need to protect this. If you're training 4 days a week, this is not where you pull the calories from. Second of all, is where you pull the calories from. It shouldn't be carbohydrates if you're trying to fuel the bike. As cliche as carbs are king. Now, obviously, there's a load more layers of like, are they doing a thing where they're seeing Bagacha eat 150 grams of carbohydrates on the bike, so I'm going to do that? So are they blowing an energy budget on the bike as well?
Yeah.
Thinking like going one end of the spectrum, because you see that. But would always, like I said, protect the session and then see where else um, you can pull. Like if they're having pints, I mean, obviously that's a whole behavior analysis motivation. If someone comes into the clinic, you're doing a lot of motivational interviewing, trying to understand the basics to why they're doing that. But it's the same as any normal person. It's
But
like,
sorry to cut across you there because I think that one's interesting for a lot of us. Is alcohol, is that more detrimental to our weight loss or fitness goals than just the raw calories you see on the outside of a can or a bottle of wine?
yeah, like I mean, the issue is rarely the alcohol itself. Yeah, it's not nutrition dense, like it's empty kind of calories, but it's normally like I would drink a bottle of wine and then we have a few nibbles and then the next day we're
Yeah.
feeling like crap. And it's the behavioral. Everything comes down to behavior. Like whether it's an amateur, whether it's a pro rider, it's like it's the behavior that is the foundation of all the knock-ons of this. If your behavior is to like if back like the alcohol itself, like I said, the next day it might cause issues. Your motivation will be lower. Your ability to say no to kebab at 2 a.m. is going to be lower. Let's be honest. We've all been there. Do you know what I mean? Or like the bottle of wine with a few crisps and stuff. So, and it's impossible then to like monitor what you're having. And it's not about monitoring, but like it's common sense. If you're going to consume more alcohol, you're going to have less authority over your decisions. But it comes out, like I said, like so much of the work I think is like comes down to behavioral in the sense of like your behavioral, your foundation. And what I mean when I say that is like for me when I start was like, what does your week look like? Do you take the action behavior of like planning out your food for the week, and not really strictly like, or do you cook once, eat twice, like that kind of thing. Those basic things of like looking at the athlete as a person in front of you rather than just like, oh, you need to support this. So like whether you're an elite athlete, an amateur athlete, or just someone who doesn't even do sport that just wants to lose weight, it's like, what are you doing day to day that supports those goals? So for example, do you have shopping in? Can you cook? Can you, it's clever problem solving. It's like, oh, I don't have time to cook with this and the other. Okay, what's a healthy option if you're in the office all day that you can get rather than getting uh, your chicken fillet spicy roll and a can of Coke at lunch? Is there
Good
options like
choice.
that? Yeah. And we've all been there in Ireland, particularly. But like those foundational behaviors that influence the decisions we then make, the knock-on effect, it's not different to the alcohol. Like, and I'm not criminalizing alcohol, but like the knock-on effect to that could be negative. The knock-on effect of making the right choices, knowing like, and if we're talking about an athlete, like it's really easy, way like they're my training days, therefore at lunch I need to fuel, I need to have if I'm going out in the evening. But all of those things that we do to make sure that we make the right choices, whether it's from a healthy eating point of view, whether it's from a fueling point of view, that you make the decisions easier and break down barriers. And obviously there's education and understanding, because that can be a barrier in itself. If you don't understand the importance of, if you're trying to lose weight, the importance of high quality protein for satiety and for the importance to maintain lean mass and and everything around that and what that looks like, because you could literally get a person who's like thinks avocado is high in protein, which I have seen a lot. To be totally honest, because it's a health food, like people think, yeah, it's high in protein. It's like, no, it's not. Or
what I actually find quite tricky though with this idea of fuel for the work required and protecting the training days. So you're creating the deficit on rest days essentially. And so Monday and Friday for a lot of amateurs becomes their rest days. So you're stricter on Monday and Friday, but you're running quite a small calorie deficit on those days. So when you zoom out and you look at a bird's eye macro view of the 7 day, now you're in a negative energy deficit for the week.
Yeah.
But that assumes 100% compliance across all the days. Now, if you're a normal person and you have one day where you end up working a little bit late and you come home and it's 9 o'clock and you reach for the takeaway menu, you're slightly over your calorie budget for that day. And now when you zoom out from the 7 days, you're like, shit, I'm actually not in a calorie deficit at all over the 7 days now. I'm in a slight calorie surplus, despite being really strict for 95% of the week. And that's a bitter pill to swallow for motivation then, because you like to see that little bit of progress week on week to give you that motivation to roll into the next week.
Yeah. No, totally. And like for me, it still comes down to like I always say to people, like to keep that motivation and to take that pressure off, because sometimes we're like all or nothing people as well. But like, it's like if you get 80% right, you're going to achieve a lot. Or like nobody's 100%, not even an elite athlete is 100%. So I think it's about then having the discussions around like, if this happens and what that happens, rather than having, first of all, reaching for the takeaway menu. Do we have something in the freezer? Have we cooked once, eaten twice? There is that. I also think it's like, if we look at Monday to Friday, there's easier ways to, or Monday to Tuesday, sorry, let's say that's our calorie deficit. It's given the knowledge and like understanding that there's easier ways to create a calorie deficit as well. Like sometimes we make it really hard for ourselves, and like one of those easier ways within reason is like making the right choice of like lower fat options, and then we can like not having the avocado, even though it's a healthy fat, not criminalizing avocado, having not going for that with your breakfast with your eggs and your toast. It's like, well, maybe let's skip the avocado or half the portion, and then all of a sudden we save 200 calories. Do you know what I mean? So on those days that we're choosing wiser choices, you're getting a drink, why don't you get a drink that doesn't have calories in it? So God forbid I say a Diet Coke and I'll have half of the internet on me saying Diet Coke's going to kill you. Diet Coke's not going to kill you. But like, if the greater good is that for your health or something that you need to lose weight, then the one like without the sugar is going to be the better option for you. So it's about understanding what you can do with those days, and then understanding like, if I have an amateur in front of me who's working a 9 to 5 or whatever, or working late, again, it comes back to like looking at the person in front of you, meeting them where they're at. What are the barriers and challenges to that specific person? This is where like generalized nutrition or all of these strong opinionated opinions like, you need to do this, you need to do that. And it's like, no, you need to look at the person in front of you, whether it's an amateur, whether it's a professional. I have guys who have 2 kids under the age of 2 and they're professional athletes trying to cycle like 100 race days a year. And that's the challenge in front of them. And they're like, I'm eating the crusts from my kids' toast. It's like, I'm not meant to be tracking. It's like, okay, well, let's like, it's not ideal, but let's make it as ideal as we can in the circumstance you're in. And whether that's like, it goes down to like, whether that's, again, is whether you're an amateur, whether you're a weekend warrior, or if you're a professional, those principles and foundations of understanding what the barriers are at, and then layering the science stuff on top of it, and understanding how much science they need, how much if I just say the knock-on effect of like, do you know what, just increase your fruit and veg in your meals, And that knock-on effect might be like, oh, they're feeling fuller and they're eating less. It's not sciencey.
Yeah.
It's or what the message I'm giving them. It's basic, and it's that low-hanging fruit that actually has a ripple effect.
On the days, back to the kind of idea, the fuel for the work required on our Monday and Friday are deficit days, we'll call them. So for me, I'm like 1850 calories on a total rest day if I'm trying to lose weight on HEXIS. 1850 it's a tight enough day, like you're strict enough. There's not a lot of indulging on an 1850 day.
Yeah, no.
Like you start realizing turkey burgers are a bit more valued than chicken breasts at that
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
calorie point. But what's your thoughts on a compressed feeding window for those days where you're delaying feeding until like 2 o'clock? So now you're taking your 1800 calories and you only have between the hours of 2 o'clock and say 8 o'clock to eat those
Yeah, yeah,
1800
yeah.
calories.
Yeah, like I mean, it can actually work for people. Like I mean, some people are the type of person that like once I start eating, I just eat. Whereas some people, because like if they can compress that, like, oh, you know what, I don't really have a morning appetite. If as it's not going to kill me if I just have a coffee in the morning, and don't eat till 11, 12, and then it literally is, like I said, it's a knock-on behavior. It's like I know this is kind of my rule window, and you know what, that actually works for me. If we're looking at like a point of view, it doesn't work for everyone. There's a high risk of like if you've a history of disorder eating or eating disorders, can be a really dangerous place to go, to be honest, because that rules and regulations feeds into that, and it can be a dangerous thing. From there's some research, so like it can be for women, there can be hormonal disruption from a point of view. So there's that. I think again it goes back to like for me, I wouldn't have an athlete on it because I'm like, oh, if we leave a big long gap, we're risking no protein feeding on those muscles, and then in the end of the day, we're going to potentially lose lean mass, which in the long run is going to be damaging for muscle retention, which could be damaging um for like weight loss and performance, or like maintaining, like, because we want more lean mass obviously. So it can work. Again, it goes down to the person in front of you. um there's just considerations, and it's not the end all as sometimes social media says it. Again, it's a method from a behavior point of view. Some people, like, yourself, when you're busy, you're like, this is great. The easiest way for me to lose weight is just to be busy because
Yeah.
I don't have time to eat. And that's kind of the concept. It's like, oh, I just only have this window to eat. So obviously there's less time. All it's doing is it's creating less time to eat the calories. It's not that it's a magic physiological thing. It's basically a smaller time period to eat that energy. So you're naturally going to have less energy to eat.
Is there like a cellular autophagy, cellular cleanup benefit to it? Have you seen research on that?
There is some research, but like I mean, I wouldn't, like, I'm practical. I wouldn't be putting my hat on anything enough that I'd feel confident in telling an athlete to do it. Like, I'm very much like thinking of like the damage it could do. If
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's really damaging, but I'm
It's just a
just
cost
thinking
risk type thing.
it's a exactly, it's a cost risk thing, and it's, in the end of the day, if I'm going to cause more damage to a person by doing this, um, and we look at a global approach, then what's the point? That's the way I see it.
I've gone from 88 kilograms down to 79 kilograms, and honestly, I still can't believe it. The crazy thing is, I'm eating way more than I've ever eaten before. I used to think eating less was the answer, but it turns out I was underfueling for so long, compromising weight loss, performance, and importantly for me, my health. The difference I feel on the bike this season, it's absolutely massive. My power numbers are up, I feel stronger, and the biggest thing for me is I still have energy left for work. I can sit down after long rides and actually focus on podcast interviews and conversations. Before, I'd have been completely wiped out, stuck on the couch for the rest of the day, doom scrolling Instagram. And that's all down to HEXIS. It's personalized fueling built around you, your training, and your goals. This isn't guesswork either. Teams like Q36.5, Ineos, Uno X are already using HEXIS. And it's part of a bigger shift we're seeing right now across pro cycling towards properly dialed nutrition. HEXIS have hooked up an amazing deal for Roadman listeners. So if you want to feel the difference for yourself, go to HEXIS, HEXIS.live And you can use my code there. It's just Roadman, and that's going to save you 25% at checkout. So it's code Roadman, ROADMAN. All the details are in the show notes. So if you take that to its natural conclusion, what does somebody who has chronically underfueled, like they're in low energy availability for a long period of time, what does that
Yeah.
manifest as? How would someone know if they're in this category?
Low energy availability. Yeah, like I mean, it's a really tricky one because low energy availability, it's so prevalent. And the problem is it mightn't be prevalent on the day, it mightn't be prevalent tomorrow. It might be 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line when we see like deficiencies in blood work, when we see stress factors, when we see an increase of people like, why is this person getting sick 3 or 4 times in like sick enough in a cycling calendar, let's say. Um, and it's a tricky
So it's
one
linked to
because
immunity.
yeah, exactly. There's so much like I mean, there's research show that like, and obviously we know from common sense is if someone is getting sick a lot, even though they might be a healthy weight as well, because you might be like body's a strange thing. It can maintain a healthy weight, but if you're going through low energy availability within a session, like if you're under fueling on the bike, you can still potentially be in a low energy availability for that period, and then you're just trying to refeed after that. It still
Oh,
can
so it's like
be
a micro low energy availability as opposed to like a global
yeah,
macro one.
exactly. But like it's a funny thing because someone could still be a healthy weight and they could be still in low energy availability. So this concept of like under fueling lives outside just it lives outside just the total amount of energy we take in a day. If you're not taking enough energy on the bike, you're risking under fueling as well. So like for these things, like it's it's hard to catch up. It's hard to completely catch. But like if you're getting blood work, we can see hormonal changes. We can see for men the low testosterone. Um, we can with women it can be a little more obvious because of obviously menstrual dysfunction or anything like that. Um, but this low energy availability is really prevalent, and in people's faces mightn't be that prevalent. So if we even look at like things like low energy availability in if you do a fasting window or something, there could be a risk of that. Do you know what I mean? So I think
Is there
we are
anything
getting
like,
better.
sorry, cut across you. Is there
No,
anything,
no.
because I guess the blood work feels like it's going to be a little bit of a lagging indicator. It's going to tell me, oh, you're in trouble long after the fact. Is there any like precursors to that? Could I look to monitor libido, sleep quality, duration, any
Yeah.
combination of those things together are going to be early warning signs?
Yeah, like I mean, absolutely. They're probably the most obvious ones. Obviously, if your training quality is crap. If looking at more metrics, if you have a whoop or anything like that, what's your resting heart rate? What is your heart rate variability? All of these things. If there's big changes and disruption, if we see any of those, that could be an indication to we have in like issue around energy availability. So all of these things can give us knowledge prior to bloods before we can like like you said, like particularly if you're an amateur, you're not going to see specific bloods.
Yeah.
You're not going to get bloods every 3 months like we do in the World Tour or in professional cycling. But all of these things can be an indication if there's severe changes that we can predict or flag a low energy availability, you know. But like the low libido is a huge one, as obviously people don't feel comfortable exactly talking about, but like like your body's a clever thing. The first thing that's going to go is your sex hormones because it's just going to go into survival. Do you know what I mean? It's not going to want to reproduce essentially. So these things are really obvious.
But you're not having riders coming in the door telling you their sex drives down.
No, not like we have a close relationship, but there's a certain degree that this is where working on the relationship's important. But there's certain metrics we can look at. But the easiest one we'd always look at from a status, like, and it goes back to blood, is like testosterone, which is pretty interlinked with that anyway. For me, because obviously I work mainly with male riders. For a female, it's a lot easier in the sense of like, have you missed periods
Yeah.
for over 3 months, etc., etc.
I think I guess probably a nice place to leave it as well and wrap it up
Uh,
with a nice bow. Hopefully we'll do this in person next time since we're both Dublin based.
yeah, you can do.
Thank you so much for your time, Sophie.
No, thanks, Emil. Thanks, Emil.